Hello students. In continuation to our previous sessions on external analysis that comprised of the macro environment analysis and the competitive analysis, today we shall be talking about the internal analysis, which is an important precursor to creating the SWOT matrix or the TOWS matrix for further movement and decisions related to the strategic choice. Now, in the internal analysis, we shall be talking about two major frameworks that are used by organizations for internal analysis. One is the resource-based view and the VRIN, and the next approach is the value chain analysis. So we shall start with the internal analysis one, and that is resource-based view and the VRIN. Now, as you are aware that internal analysis is the systematic evaluation of the key internal features of an organization. Now, for that purpose, two major approaches are used for internal analysis. The first of the approach is the resource-based view for internal analysis. Now, this approach is a strategic management framework used for internal analysis of the firms. Number two, it emphasizes the importance of a firm's internal resources and capabilities in achieving sustainable competitive advantage rather than external industry factors alone. And by focusing on unique firm-specific resources and capabilities, it offers a way to build sustainable competitive advantage. Now, if we talk about the resource-based view, it is a method of analyzing and identifying a firm's strategic advantages based on examining its resources, capabilities, and competencies. The resource-based view's underlying premise is that firms differ in fundamental ways because each firm possesses a unique bundle of resources. Now, if you try to visualize within the same industry, you would be able to see that the different firms into the same industry have got a unique bundle of resources. Then each firm develops competencies from these resources and they become the source of firm's competitive advantage. Now, moving ahead with the key proponents and the origin of the resource-based approach. Now, primarily this approach was for the first time proposed by Edith Penrose in 1959. And in the book, The Theory of the Growth of the Firm, Edith Penrose argued that a firm's resources and the way they are used determine its growth and performance. Now, that was a very wonderful contribution in a way. Now, this was further substantiated in 1984 by Berger Werner Falk. In his paper, A Resource-Based View of the Firm, Berger formally introduced the term resource-based view and compared it with Porter's market-based view. Now, again, further developments related to this resource-based view came in 1991 by way of J. Barney's path-breaking contribution, where he provided a theoretical framework for analyzing the firm's resources and introducing the VRIN criterion, something that we shall be talking about in the later part of this session. In 1995, David J. Collis and Cynthia A. Montgomery in 1995 extended the resource-based view to discuss how resources must be exploited effectively through strategic positioning. Now, before we move on to how to use the resource-based view and the VRIN framework, let's first understand that what are the resources available to the firms. Now, as you all are aware that the resources are assets employed in the activities and processes of the organization. Now, these resources can be tangible resources like machinery and technology, or they can be intangible resources like patents, the reputation of the firm, the brand image, and several other intangible resources that could be like managerial expertise, the quality of the leadership, the strategic leadership being provided by. These resources can be obtained externally or they can be internally generated. Now, externally, by way of collaborations that the firm may have for the accessibility to resources, and internally, like over a period of time, they can move on to creating the resources on their own. Then the resources can be specific and non-specific. Now, specific resources can only be used for highly specialized purposes and are very important to the organization in adding value to goods and services. Then resources which are less specific are not that important in adding value, but are more flexible. Then the resource-based view, it categorizes the resources into four. Number one is tangible resources that may comprise of physical assets like plants, equipments, and cash. Then second is intangible resources that may comprise of brand reputation, intellectual property, company culture, strategic leadership. Then the third is human resources that may comprise of the skills, the know-how, the motivation of the employees. And the fourth are organizational capabilities like the kind of routines that are followed in the organization, the kind of processes, then the kind of coordination that exists into the organization, and how the resources are integrated into the organization. The next thing into this are the capabilities. Now, capabilities are firm-specific skills and organizational knowledge to optimally combine, manage, and leverage the available resources, which can be tangible, intangible, organizational, and so. Competencies or capabilities will often be internally generated, but may be obtained by collaboration with other organizations. Okay. Then certain competencies are quite likely common to competing firms within an industry or a strategic group. Then they are embedded in organizational routines, which means that they are well-honed patterns of performing the activities. And then they are often tacit, that is, they are difficult to reduce to algorithms or procedural guides. The next thing that we shall be understanding is core competencies or distinctive competencies. So you may now understand the sequence. We started with resources, then the way organization combines, manages and leverages the resources become the capabilities of the organization. And again, ahead of the capabilities are the distinctive or the core competencies of the organization. So the core competencies or distinctive capabilities are combinations of resources and capabilities which are unique to a specific organization and which are responsible for generating its competitive advantage. So again, I repeat the sequence: resources, capabilities, distinctive competencies, and finally competitive advantage. Now in 1993, Professor K identified 4 potential sources of core competencies. Now number one, as per him, was reputation, and the example that he quoted was Apple. Then architecture was the second potential source of core competencies, and that was the internal and the external relationships, and the example could be an organization like Johnson & Johnson. The third potential source of core competency was innovation, and for that we can consider the example of Tesla. And for fourth, the potential source of core competency is strategic assets, and for that we can take the example of organizations like Pfizer or AstraZeneca or Eli Lilly or let's say 3M or DuPont. Now, what is the criteria to evaluate the core competencies? Okay. Now, the factors that are used to evaluate core competencies are complexity, that is how elaborate is the bundle of resources and capabilities which comprise the core competence. Identifiability, which means that how difficult it is to identify the kind of resources and capabilities which contribute to the core competency. Imitability is that how difficult it is to imitate the core competence of an organization. Durability is that how long does it take to be replaced by an alternative competency. Superiority is that whether it is clearly superior to the competencies of other organizations. And adaptability is that how easily a competence can be leveraged or adapted to a changed context. Another factor or criteria to evaluate core competency, which is perhaps the most important, is customer orientation. That is, how is the competence perceived by the customer and how far is it linked to their needs. So as you can understand that despite having a very good competency, okay, but with very small linkages to the customers, or maybe that competence not translating to satisfying specific needs of the customer, may not be considered to be a distinctive or a core competency. Okay, now here in this particular diagram, you can see the relationship. So relationships, the things start with resources that may comprise of human, financial, physical, technological, legal, and informational resources. Okay. Then they get converted into capabilities, which is about how the resources are being combined, managed, and leveraged by the organization. Capabilities are firms' specific skills, relationships, organizational knowledge. Now this gets translated into a core competence, that it may be a distinctive or superior competence of the organization, skills, technology, relationship, knowledge, and reputation of the firm, unique and difficult to copy. And finally, they must translate into a perceived customer benefit or a value addition for the customer. Now, you have to remember at this point of time that not all capabilities are core competencies. Only those that add greater value than those of the competitors can be considered to be a core competency or a distinctive competency or a superior competency of the organization. Now let's come to the application of the resource-based view in the internal analysis. Okay, so the resource-based view is used for internal analysis in the following ways, or in fact audit the firm's unique resources and capabilities. So that's the first thing that the organizations may do. And one way of doing it is that organization may search for unique resources and capabilities in the different functional departments or domains of the organization, and make a checklist which may be known as the organizational capability factors, or OCPs. The next is the organization may try to identify whether which one of these are core competencies based upon a certain criteria that we shall be talking about slightly later. Then determine which resources can create sustained competitive advantage, and then further shape these strategies based on internal strengths rather than just responding to the threats, that external threats of the environment. Now let's come to the VRIN criteria for analyzing capabilities and competencies. As I've said in the earlier slide, that after identifying specific capabilities and competencies, let's check them for their probability of being a core competence or a distinctive competence, and subsequently a sustained competitive advantage for the organization. Now the first of the criteria that we use for analyzing the capabilities and competency is known as V. Now, V stands for valuable, that is, whether a particular capability or competency is helping the firm exploit opportunities or neutralize the threats that are available or that are present in the external environment of the organization. The next criteria is rare, which means that whether that particular capability or competency is possessed by many other firms into the industry, or is it only possessed by the incumbent firm that we are considering for analysis. Then the third criterion is inimitable, that is whether the competency is difficult to imitate due to unique historical conditions, causal ambiguity, or social complexity. Okay, and then finally non-substitutable, which means that whether an strategically equivalent valuable resource that are themselves not rare or inimitable. So if a particular capability or competency is valuable, it is rare, it is inimitable, and it is non-substitutable, then we can consider that particular competency to be a competitive advantage for the firm, and sustainability will depend upon the degree of value, rarity, inimitability, and non-substitutability of that particular capability or competency. Thank you so much.